And a very happy Thursday to you at 12:07 in the West. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the day off. He'll be back with us on Monday. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. We have a big show for you today. Coming up after the news at 1, it's the Fix California Hour. Assemblyman Jeff Gonzalez joins us. He was excluded from the California Legislative Latino Caucus with others because of his party affiliation. So he said, "You won't invite me? Fine, I'll start my own caucus." He's going to tell us all about that coming up next hour. And Professor Barbara Stone joins us after the news at 2. But first, if you thought that things couldn't get worse for embattled Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, you were wrong. It keeps getting worse and worse and worse for the mayor of L.A. We know that she was in Ghana when the fires hit at the beginning of January. All of us knew about the wind. All of us knew about the fire risk because that's all that was on the news. And you always can tell when there's a weather story because the types of stories that they talk about on the news changes. You know how this works. When it rains in Los Angeles, they go wall to wall. Wall to wall. It's not just the first 10 minutes of the newscast. That's all they talk about. And you know the types of stories that they do. First thing, they start out with the weather reporter. And you get an update on just exactly how bad the rain is going to be, what time it's going to start, what time it's going to stop, how many inches, where it's going to be bad, where it's going to be fine. Okay, then let's throw it to the traffic reporter. We'll find out how bad the roads are. And then we go to LAX to find out if the flights have been delayed or canceled. And then we go find the dog that fell in the river or the bum that fell in the river, and they bring the helicopter and they try to save them. That's how it works. When there are high winds, when the Santa Ana winds are kicking up, and we know that Southern California is going to be a wind tunnel, they treat it almost exactly the same way as the rain. That's all it is. All we hear about is the wind. And then they have the reporter out in a rain slicker for some reason. Why you'd wear a rain slicker when you're covering the wind, I don't know. Maybe that's just the costume. I guess they could dress up like an Indian or a construction worker or a police officer, but they dress him up in a rain slicker. I'm sure there's a reason behind it. That's what they do. And then they throw it around to all the different people like they do with the rain. If you live here and you have the television on, or you have the radio on, or you're paying attention to social media, it's almost impossible not to know that the wind is here. And if you live in an area that's particularly at risk of fire, many areas in California have the Smokey the Bear sign. You remember those? I'm sure you've seen them all over town, where it tells you what the fire risk of the day is. Some days it's extreme, some days it's mild. Whatever the case may be, they have it up. So not only do you see it on your television, do you hear it on your radio, but when you're driving around, just in case you're living in a world where all you do is listen to music off your phone, you can still see Smokey the Bear telling you that we're all at fire risk. And the mayor of Los Angeles is now claiming that she had no clue that the wind was coming, and she had no clue that there was fire risk in Southern California. And had she known, she wouldn't have got on the plane and gone to Ghana on a diplomatic mission. And diplomatic mission, by that, I mean she attended a cocktail party at an inauguration for a foreign president. Mind you, this is the same woman who, when she was a candidate for office, said that her entire time as mayor would be devoted to Los Angeles, and she would not be leaving the city for international trips. She said there are a few exceptions. like going to Sacramento to lobby the legislature for money for Los Angeles, going to Washington, D.C. to lobby Congress. She mentioned, I believe, San Francisco, and she mentioned New York City. But outside of that, she wasn't going to be globetrotting all over planet Earth. But of course, that lasted exactly one day. Because not only was she in Ghana, but how many times has she been to Paris? She says she's going to Paris to investigate the Olympics, find out what worked, what didn't work, because LA is going to be hosting the Olympics in 2028, and she's doing her research in Gay Paris. She's got to go over there, wear the beret, eat the croissants, drink the wine, eat the cheese, and have people be very rude to her, presumably. But she's everywhere but here. And it's understandable. Being mayor of LA is a hard job. We have a lot of problems. First of all, the city looks like a dump. You got trash all over the place. You got the homeless encampments everywhere you turn. You've got graffiti. You've got failing infrastructure. We have some problems. And if you're the one who's in charge of the city, you're at the top of the food chain, you're at the top of the pyramid, you're responsible for fixing all of that. Well, who's got time for that? Not me. So if you can find an excuse to get on a plane and get out of town, that's what you do. And when she became mayor of Los Angeles, I believe it's the first time she's ever been an executive. She was a longtime member of Congress before she was elected mayor. And before that, she was a member of the state assembly and worked her way up to speaker. Now, when you're speaker, you're in charge of the caucus, you're in charge of the body, but you're still a legislator. You're not running a state, you're not running a city, you're not running a company, you're not chairman of a party. You're someone who is essentially herding cats, which is what she did in the state assembly. But now she's an executive. Now she's in charge. Now she's the one that we all look to fix this place. And it's a hard, if not impossible, job. She promised us the world, and she hasn't delivered. And the truth is, she can't deliver. You cannot reconcile her ideology with what needs to be done to fix the city. It's just not possible. So what you have to do is you have to say, I'm working on it, and I just need more time. And if you give me more money and more time, we'll make a dent in the problem. And then you get on the plane and you get out of Dodge. Because if you're not around to answer questions, then people will forget that you exist and they'll move on to something else. That's the theory behind being out of sight, out of mind. You're here for the ceremonial stuff. You're here when one of the teams wins a world championship. You're here when we're celebrating something. But when the focus is on your failures and the focus is on the unfixable problems of the city, you don't want to be around to talk about that. You're better off doing something else. So she claims that she was completely unaware of all of the wind and the fire risk. And she implied that it was the failure of the LA Fire Department for not telling her to cancel her trip. Okay, let's explore that for a second. You're the fire chief, and you serve at the pleasure of the mayor. The mayor is duly elected by the people, and the mayor, if you believe her, was asked to be part of a foreign delegation to Ghana. If you're the fire chief, are you going to go to your boss and are you going to say, you can't go on vacation because you have more important things to do here? What kind of lead balloon do you think that would go off like? Who's going to do that? Who's dumb enough to step on that rake? There are people who do that. They just don't last very long. Have you ever been talked to like that by someone who works for you? Where they get in your face and they start bossing you around? How long does that last? That wouldn't go over well. As it turns out, the fire department not only was aware of the wind and the fire risk, but they were screaming about it from the rooftops. They were issuing public statements. They were very active on social media. They were talking to the media. They were doing everything they could to attract attention to the fact that there was wind and fire risk. I would point out that the liaison between Mayor Karen Bass's office and the fire department was on administrative leave. Not because of anything the fire department did. No. The liaison was on administrative leave because he was making false bomb threats. You remember him? That was his job. If you've got a complete goofball working for you, why can't you bury them in some position that's not really that important? You got a friend, you got a relative, you got a drinking buddy at your neighborhood tavern, and they're down on their luck, and they need a job. They need a W-2 so they can put a car in the garage, a chicken on the table, and stockings up on the chimney at Christmas. Why can't you give them some job that just doesn't matter? Can't you find something in your office that's just not really that important? Can't you find some job that goes to friends and family where if they screw up or they just show up to work one day and they say, you know what, I'm happy to clock in at the plant. I'm happy to be the man in the gray flannel suit. I'm happy to be here sitting in my corner office. I'm just not feeling it today. So why don't I just take out this phone here and reach out and touch someone, and when I do that, make a false bomb threat? Wouldn't that be fun? It's boring here at the office today. Sheila down the hall is popping some microwave popcorn, and it's stinking up the office. It's not a holiday. It's not a day where the city of Los Angeles is springing for lunch. There's nothing going on here. Why don't we spice things up with a bomb threat? Because if we call in a bomb threat, then we got some action. Then we got something to talk about. Then, instead of popping another thing of popcorn, later on in the afternoon, Sheila's going to come in here and say, hey, did you hear about that bomb threat? That's crazy. And then he got caught. Because if you do something electronic now, it's not like the old days. This isn't Crank Yankers. This isn't the Jerky Boys. You can't get away with the prank phone calls the way you used to in the 80s and 90s. Sure, many of us had fun, not necessarily with bomb threats, but playing pranks on the phone. Well, most of us grew up to the point to where we realized that if you continue doing that as an adult with better technology, at some point you're going to get in trouble. Apparently, that never crossed this man's mind. So he decided to have some fun by calling in some bomb threats, and he got caught. So he's on administrative leave. So the man who's responsible for keeping an eye on the fire department is sitting at home watching reruns of Judge Judy on detention because of all the bomb threats. So Karen Bass, instead of making sure that there's someone in her office to keep in touch with the fire department, she's more concerned about being Carmen Sandiego and traveling around the globe. So no one at the mayor's office bothered to tell the fire department, for example, that there was no water in the reservoir. They never bothered to tell the fire department that no one at DWP was going to fix all the broken fire hydrants. And no one bothered to check about the weather before the mayor got on a plane and went to an inauguration in Ghana. Because after all, the man who was the most qualified person for that job happened to get caught up in the fake bomb threats. So we'll just let that position go unfilled, and we'll make sure those duties aren't performed. And we'll just roll the dice and see what happens. Okay, they rolled the dice, and they got a snake eyes. So she's in Ghana, and she said if she knew that there was wind or fire in Los Angeles or the risk of it, she wouldn't have left. And only if someone at that fire department had said something to her, she wouldn't have got on the plane in the first place. Then, yesterday, we find out that Karen Bass tweeted about the wind threat from her official Twitter account before the fires even started. Because like everyone else in town, yes, she was aware of the wind too. Now, the hidden secret behind all of this is that politicians do not, in fact, tweet on their own, with few exceptions, including the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Most of them have their staffers do the tweeting for them, and most of them don't even read their own Twitter feed, so they have no clue what's going out in their name. Is it possible that Karen Bass had staffers tweeting about the wind, and she didn't read it, and they never communicated with her, and she was totally unaware of it? Yeah, I guess that's possible. I mean, think about different events that have taken place that have dominated the news for obvious reasons. I'm sure there is someone out there who on 9/11 was sitting at home in the morning watching Turner Classic Films. And they're sitting there watching, I don't know, a musical from the 1930s or 1940s, and they had no clue that those planes flew into the buildings. And then they showed up to have breakfast with one of their friends, and they said, "So, what's going on? Anything new?" It's possible. I bet you there is someone out there like that who did something similar to what I just described, but most people were aware of 9/11 after it happened. Some people had more details than others, but people were aware that there was a problem going on in New York City. If you're the mayor of Los Angeles, my guess is, in addition to being someone who's ambitious, who is interested in politics, you're interested in the news. Because the news essentially just covers politics. That is a huge portion of what the news covers. So if you're interested in the profession that you're in, you pay attention to the news to find out what people think of what you're doing and what everyone else is doing. It usually just comes with the job. But Karen Bass said she was living in a cocoon and had no idea that any of this was going on, despite the fact that it was all over the news and that she herself, from her official Twitter account, was tweeting about it. Then today, we see a tweet from a guy by the name of James O'Keefe. He is the guy that used to run Project Veritas. They're the ones that go undercover and they get people to admit to things that they would otherwise not admit to. Here is what he tweeted earlier today. He said, while Los Angeles burned, LA Mayor Karen Bass was out of the country. Now she's claiming she's investigating why no one stopped her from leaving. We have an LA Mayor's Office employee on tape admitting why Bass fled Los Angeles. The truth is coming. Stay tuned. That audio has not yet been released, but my guess is when it does, it's not going to look good for Karen Bass. Even though Los Angeles is a heavily Democratic city who reliably votes for the Democratic candidate, I am willing to go on the record today and say I think Karen Bass is toast. I think Karen Bass will lose re-election and may not even ultimately run for re-election. That interview that she did with Alex Michelson earlier this week, the audio that we played for you on this program, was a career ender for her. Because in addition to being an obvious lie, saying that she did not know that the wind was coming, she did not know that there was fire risk because nobody told her, what she did in that tape is worse because it is indefensible. Politicians not only go out and do interviews on their own to make their case, they rely on surrogates to go out and make the case on their behalf. Yesterday, we had a caller call in who cited an op-ed piece that was written by one of Karen Bass's friends from high school, defending her, saying essentially she can't see the future. She didn't know that any of this was on the horizon. Had she known that the fires were coming, she obviously would have stayed. Okay, now we know that's not true. Now we know that that's not the case. And she, by her own admission, acknowledges that going to Ghana was a massive mistake and a broken campaign promise at that. If you are Steve Soberoff, who is her point man on rebuilding the Palisades, or you are a member of Congress who has endorsed Karen Bass, you are Gavin Newsom, and you're sitting down for an interview, and a reporter asks you about Karen Bass and says, Karen Bass says she had no clue that there was wind and fire risk in Los Angeles before she left. Do you believe her? And then they tap dance like Danny Kaye all around, and they figure, okay, I survived that. Let's move on to the next question. Well, she tweeted about it before the fire started. What do you make of that? They start tap dancing some more. They don't know what to say. Well, the fire department put out all of these statements publicly, here, 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 and here. Does she not pay attention to what the fire department is doing and saying? Well, here are news reports from ABC7, KTTV, KTLA, KCBS, KCAL, KNBC, The Weather Channel. Does she not look at the news? No surrogate, no political ally wants to be put in that position. It's one thing for Karen Bass to make an unbelievable claim that no one buys. It's another thing for other politicians, other public figures to spend their own political capital to make claims that are obviously not true to save her bacon. At some point, when that's what she's asking you to do, it becomes easier to cut bait. And what I believe you're going to start seeing is you're going to start seeing politicians who are allies of Karen Bass cutting bait on her. Because at this point, the ask that she is making of them will destroy their own credibility. You can't do that and expect people to take you seriously. And that's what she's asking you to do. If you're the LA Times, whose owner has now been red-pilled, if you're going to go out and defend her, she's asking you to write something that you can't defend. And in a one-party city, in a one-party state, you can get away with a certain amount of that. But when you have the fires and the damage and the destruction that we just all lived through, no one wants any part of that. What she's been able to get away with her entire career, she's not going to be able to get away with now. This is a different animal. This is a new ball game. I think Karen Bass is done. What say you? At 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Your calls coming up, but right now it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And if you missed yesterday's show and you want to find out about the hookers in the barrio in San Diego, that's easy to do. All you have to do is subscribe to the podcast edition of this program on your handy-dandy iPhone. All of the episodes will be downloaded to your phone automatically, and you can enjoy them whenever or wherever you please. I believe LA Mayor Karen Bass's political career is over. That interview that she did with Alex Michelson earlier this week, where she said she's demanding an investigation as to why people around her allowed her to go to Ghana instead of staying home and dealing with the fires, it's a bad look. It's not just a bad look. It's a bad look that's led to bad news and more bad news and more bad news on top of that, including the fact that she tweeted about the wind before the fires even started. Do you believe Karen Bass, her political career is now over? I do. What say you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222? Your calls coming up, but right now it's time for headlines. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. The Fix California Hour coming up after the news at 1. Right now, we're taking your calls at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Karen Bass wants a full investigation as to why she was allowed to go to Ghana. She says it's not her fault. She wasn't told about the wind or the fire risk. I think she's done. What say you at 800-222-5222? Let's begin with Lily in West Hollywood. Lily, hello.
Hi, John. Yes, she thinks we're stupid. We're not. Well, we're a little bit, but not that stupid. The first person, whether it's Lindsay or Caruso, whichever one, is the first one to publicly ask her to step down. That's the one that I will vote for and help in any way I can.
Well, there was a big piece in yesterday's Los Angeles Times saying that, well, publicly, Lindsay Horvath, the county supervisor in the district that encompasses Pacific Palisades, has been complimentary of the mayor. In private, her text messages have been some sharp elbows, and there have been some sharp elbows thrown between her and members of Karen Bass's staff as well. Whether or not that animosity will bubble into the public's eye, I don't know. But you would assume that if she's frustrated with her and irritated with her and unhappy with her performance, at a certain point in time, she's going to make a statement.
And she's going to have to, because also the longer she takes to not say something, I'm going to assume that all the birds that are together, they flock together. So I'll assume that, yes, she's just like Karen Bass. So I will never vote for her. The sooner she does it, or Caruso, the better.
All right. Thank you for the call. Let's go to Patrick in West Covina. Patrick, hello.
Hey, John. Good afternoon. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I mean, she's through with money, as the kids say. Her mismanagement's apparent. You just can't excuse cutting funding for the fire department, not being prepared, not being in the state when it goes on, lying about her not knowing what was going on. When she got off the plane, she looked like a deer in the headlights. She's not the person for the job. As far as if that's the end of her career, she might be lieutenant governor for all I know on the Kamala ticket. I mean, Democrats seem to fail forward with a lot of ease, but no, she's through, and she should be through. She's done a terrible job, and she hasn't responded the way somebody in leadership should.
And I'll tell you, it's one thing if you're bad at your job and let's just say you don't put a dent in the homeless crisis. Okay, well, we had that crisis before her. We'll certainly have that crisis after her. What she did didn't work, but it's not like what she did created the problem. It's not like what she did caused anyone to suffer. Well, I guess leaving them on the streets makes the homeless people suffer, but you understand what I'm saying. In this particular case, being bad at your job caused people's homes to burn down. And now she's saying it's going to take 5 years before they're going to be able to rebuild and move back in. You just ruin people's lives because you aren't good at your job, because you didn't communicate vital information with the fire department so they could go out and do their job properly. If you're so bad at your job that you're wrecking other people's lives, it's time for you to go.
I'd have to agree and remove with cause, basically.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to George in Northridge. George, hello.
Thanks for taking my call. I agree that basically she's done. Unfortunately, we have short memories as an electorate. And depending on how or when the next election comes up, if she can overcome, those things and people's memories lapse, she's back in the saddle. And another thing I'd like to add is, looking back, it's probably been a godsend that Kamala Harris was chosen as vice president, with Biden over her.
That's a very good point, because she was one of the finalists for that job. And had he not picked Kamala Harris, she would have been the Democratic nominee for president this last cycle. And it's entirely possible, because she is a lot more likable than Kamala Harris is, that she would have been elected president, and we would have someone this incompetent and this untruthful running the free world.
That's real true. Could you imagine what if she was vice president and if she was given, that border, czar job, what would have happened?
It would have been a disaster. Thank you for the call, sir. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Do you think Karen Bass is through? I do. What say you? More of your calls coming up in moments, but right now it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. Is it time to sell your home? Maybe you want to downsize, maybe you want to move, or maybe you inherited a home that you just don't want to hang on to. Whatever your reasons to sell, call Seller's Advantage. Seller's Advantage has been buying homes for decades. Their seller reviews speak for themselves. They're people who buy from people and will provide custom solutions that works for your needs. They offer and will buy with cash and can close in days. The great part is you don't have to worry about spending money on repairs, preparing your home to be shown, or having people coming in and out. There are no agents, just a great offer and an easy process that will give you peace of mind so you can walk away happy. So if it's time to sell your home, call Seller's Advantage for a free no-obligation offer today at 888-303-AS-IS, 888-303-AS-IS, 888-303-2747, and find them online at sellersadvantage.com. DRE number 1096168. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. Let's go to Rose in Marina Del Rey. Rose, hello.
Hey, John. Love your show. I think that Bass is a disaster, and obviously I voted for Caruso, but I got to tell you something. These voters in L.A., I don't know if they would vote her out or not in the re-election. I mean, that's what worries me. Because they put her in the first place. And also, look at the people she appointed. Okay, so she's in Ghana. Why didn't Crowley know enough to call up all the firemen that were off duty for that day? I mean, somebody should have taken the ball and ran with it, right? And so, to me, it's just it's all systemic problems with her. The people she put into those positions, the woman with DWP. I mean, obviously, she doesn't even know who to appoint to those departments when she is in Africa. So for me, I just don't think the people in L.A., the voters, they're just too into identity politics, and it's very worrisome, honestly.
Here's how I'd respond to that. If you're so bad that it cuts through the noise in a way that's not normal, like George Gascon, he was so bad that everyone in town was aware that criminals could get away with whatever they wanted to get away with because we had a district attorney that supported the criminals and thought that the people getting robbed should check their privilege. And the people of L.A. dumped him. I think that Karen Bass is so bad she's getting to George Gascon levels that puts her in the danger zone of getting dumped.
Well, the difference there is even the assistant district attorneys came out against Gascon. In this situation, Bass has all the people underneath her that she appointed, and nobody's speaking out against her. I mean, I don't see it. And she blames Crowley. And what's Crowley going to say? She wants to keep her job. It's just a problem. I mean, she's a disaster. She should never have been in that job in the first place. And now look, I mean, it's just, I don't understand. The two women, it's hard to say this too. The three women, Crowley, Quinones, and Bass, three of the most incompetent people I've seen. And it's really shameful, to be honest with you. And it's very sad to say as a woman that the three women that could have done something different that day, none of them did. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, John. Love you, Randy.
All right. Thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
Bye.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC.